Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB bikini pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Our final coaches for the series are Jordan and Drew Brannon, who are a power couple that work as online prep and lifestyle coaches with Fit Body Fusion. I decided to have them on together because I thought it would be an interesting way to approach it. Even though they have their own clientele base within the team, they are a husband and wife who have their degrees in the same field, so exercise science from the University of South Florida, which I believe from what Jay's told me is what led you guys to open your own gym, which was and I'm going to butcher this name, is it Pinellas? Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Beautiful. Pinellas Ultimate Strength House, which has since grown over the last 5 years and was recently moved to a brand new space featuring top-of-the-line equipment, a posing room, and a member lounge. They themselves actually just relocated to Arizona, but they are always traveling to support their athletes at shows or contribute to events. And when they're not working, they enjoy spending time with their golden retrievers, Oliver and Penelope, cooking, and a glass of red wine. So welcome to the show, you guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm assuming Oliver or Penelope or both are right next to you.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. We're doing this on video for you guys who might be just listening. So I noticed they both looked down when I introduced the dogs as well. Yeah. That's why I asked. So if you want to watch us chat, join us on YouTube at @celeste_fit. But Drew, I'm going to start with you because I've had Jay on, I think actually a couple times now. So we don't usually ask we usually ask the athletes like what they do before their heel hits the stage, but I want to ask you what's something you do right before your athletes hit the stage?
Like for me personally, like when I'm backstage, I'm very hands-on. I'm a bit of a control freak backstage. I will kind of say that. So I'm right back there backstage. You know, we have our backstage lighting, and I like to just touch up tans, glaze, all that stuff, run through one last final round of posing, and just like be there for our athletes, you know, and then run around up front, cheer them on, and then get back in between kind of classes or divisions and give them any feedback that I can. So
he also eats pump up candy.
I do. I steal their pump up.
Coach's tax.
Yep.
Gotta make sure it's gonna do the job.
Yeah. I also take their sweets when they go to check-ins and they get their welcome bags. I'm like, nope, I don't trust you guys to not eat these through the night. This comes back with me.
Yeah, let me keep these safe for you.
Exactly.
And they're like, where are they, coach? You're like, I lost them. No idea what happened to them.
Absolutely.
They're in my belly now.
Yeah. So I want to get into all the questions I'm going to ask all the coaches because I know we are on limited time. But before we do that, I want to know your guys' history, like as a couple, and how this evolved into now you both working for the same team.
Yeah, I mean, so Jay and I met in college. We were both in 2 miserable relationships and then ended up being friends, and then ultimately started dating and moving in together. And we did open the gym right out of college. And really, in terms of bodybuilding, we had no interest in bodybuilding. We were powerlifters. Like, we were like, those guys aren't strong. They just freaking look strong. We're actually strong people. And then our best friend through college wanted to be a prep coach. And he had always told Jordan that she had, you know, fantastic potential, and that he'd tried to convince her for a while to compete. And finally, Jay was like, you know what? I'll do it. So they did like a 6-8 week shotgun prep. And I think this is something that adds a lot of value to my coaching, was like, I wasn't the most supportive husband when Jay was doing this. So I was the one that was eating like a whole white spinach pizza on your peak week for a show.
Right in front of me.
Right in front of you. That's what powerlifters do, right? They lift heavy and eat whatever they want.
And eat whatever. Exactly.
Yeah.
So she does her show and she loved it. And I loved watching her go through the process and seeing how it kind of changed her. And she found this new version of herself through competing and confidence and just everything that this sport does for a lot of women. And then from there, like you obviously, did what you did and just kept competing. And I was like, well, I guess I'll try this. Then I went from being a powerlifter to trying to compete and then ultimately coaching after that. So I've seen this, we have seen this in a bunch of different lights and a bunch of different views from, hands-on, I used to only coach athletes in person that trained out of my gym. And then going into remote is a challenge. And there's different, hurdles to overcome. So, but yeah, it's kind of our nutshell story and crash course version. Right?
Yeah, crash course version.
I like the crash course. As I was listening to you talk, I was thinking about how much you're invested in the exercise science portion of it, right? That's what you guys studied. So to transition to online coaching would pose some new opportunities. So I've noticed when you're training the athletes who post about you training them, you're very meticulous. And then I've watched Jade doing her training sessions, and there's a huge emphasis and focus on what's actually being done and making the most of it. So what are some of the things that you guys have seen happening in the industry recently and that you've been addressing with your clients that maybe our audience could learn and benefit from applying as well?
The biggest thing when we look at program design internally right now within Fit Body Fusion, I think a lot of coaches and a lot of trainers are trying to figure out what they can get bigger on bikini athletes and wellness athletes instead of maybe looking at what you could get smaller to help improve shape. We're not prepping men's open bodybuilders, right? Where it's just like big as you can get, as lean as you can get. And I'm trying to work with a lot of girls in what I call not pigeonholing their physique. So when they just develop and they don't take a step back and really look at where's the division going, do we care about waistline this year? Do we not care about waistline? Like last year, wellness, we didn't care about waistline, right? On the pro league. So I know with some of the wellness athletes, I can be a little more aggressive in pushing growth phases and compound lifts and axial loading and things like that. Whereas bikini, we're not touching that waistline, right? So I want their waist to be as tight as we can. So then, we don't have to get the glutes as big. We don't have to get the back as big, the shoulders as big. So I'm looking at it from a little different aspect than some of the top coaches and trainers in the industry. And I think we've had some really good success this offseason. I'm excited for 2024 and all these pros that I've been working with. And there's going to be some awesome physiques coming out of Fit Body Fusion for sure.
Oh, no doubt.
Like on the amateur level, I work with a lot of the amateur athletes right now, and whether they're coming from a different coach or something like that, something that I keep seeing is that a lot of coaches aren't looking at training. And that is like a huge aspect to bodybuilding. So, one of the first things I do when I take a client on is obviously create their program for them. And yes, my program and our programs are very detail oriented and specific to the athlete. But the coach will not look at their training form. And I just took on an athlete and she will turn pro this year. If I don't, I screwed it up. And she has been sending me her training footage and it's awful. And she knows this and she's probably going to be listening. She knows who she is. It's awful, but she's gotten this far with that kind of training form. So clearly it's working. It worked for her. But now for those little details, like the upper outer glutes, getting a little bit more tight and things like that, that's where if I didn't look at her training, I would have lacked and I would have missed something. And I tell people all the time, like, I can't fault you for not knowing what you don't know. I've been so blessed to work with so many great trainers, hands-on, obviously Drew. And I was taught how to train and how to find intensity and all of these things. But, I come from an exercise science background and I still needed a trainer to teach me those things. So I think it's just about, people understanding like within your training, like get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I am now going on year 4 and my training block every year has not been the same. It's been different every single season. And it's just about constantly refining and checking in with yourself and refining that physique.
There's got to be a difference between amateurs and the pros, because I think on an amateur level, maybe you're just trying to master the basics. And then at the pro level, you're like, let's kind of zoom in a little bit more and see what can we take to that next level. So that gives me a little bit more of an idea on your personal philosophies, but how does that relate? Because I had Jamie on in one of the, I think it was the first coaches series actually for Fit Body Fusion. So I'm curious how your guys' coaching philosophies maybe go hand in hand with that, and maybe also separate you from other Fit Body Fusion coaches.
So what do you mean about between amateurs and pros?
Okay.
Philosophies.
Yeah, more so like your philosophies.
So I don't think what I've learned now from Olympians to true novices, like you can't really say because they're an Olympian, they have X training ability. That's what's the biggest surprise for me. I mean, I've written maybe 15 now programs for Jamie's Olympians at this point. And there's, and then I have like amateurs that like know how to train. So you can't really just say like, which is interesting, right? And that's the interesting part. I just did an assessment on one of Jamie's newer pros. She turned pro at nationals. Very, very in tune with her body. She is very aware of every movement and movement patterns and things like that. So it's just, it's not, we can't just assume just because they climb the ranks in the industry that kind of understanding and mind muscle connection and whatnot is there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but what is your exact training philosophy, and what do you think that it makes you unique from other coaches on the team? Like, when you're doing an assessment with someone, because with all of the people that he's creating programs for, we do an in-person assessment with them if we can.
Oh, wow.
So they're flying out to our gym in Florida when we're there, or they're flying out to Arizona. And then what we're doing is we're taking those assessments and we're building the programs based off that athlete. And a part of that too is prep work, right?
Right.
So
yeah, so that's what you're getting into.
Yeah.
Right. Is looking into like what imbalances there are, right? So coming from a corrective exercise background, Jordan's mother, my mother-in-law, owned a physical therapy clinic. So we were first exposed to in-person training from like a PT side of things. So taking that knowledge and like all the girls, I don't like absolute statements, but I can say at this point, all the girls, all the bikini girls, whatever side they're sitting into with their hip and then the opposite calf, we're seeing the same trends in terms of dysfunction with that hip and the calves with their movement patterns. So addressing that prep work. So it's about 10 to 15 minutes of prep work right now that I'm giving most of the girls to make sure they can actively get through that range of motion and then feel that. So I think that's been the biggest thing with these assessments is, and why would we know to do that with a lot of the athletes? I can shout out Adair on this. So Adair flew down last week for the women's seminar, and I beat my head against, I'm not gonna lie, I beat my head against the wall for 3 days trying to sort something out for her. And finally, I just had to swallow my own ego and go to my GM. He's 22, but he's brilliant. He understands biomechanics, but doesn't know anything about bodybuilding. And that's the great part, is he was then able to just take the motion of bodybuilding completely out of it and assess her. And I missed the silliest, stupidest thing within her physique. It's fixed. She's happy. She's feeling upper outer glute better than she ever has this week. So, yeah.
Teamwork.
Always.
A lot of teamwork.
Yeah, well, that's something I appreciate about you guys too, is you're willing to go where you need to go to get the support for your clients that you need to get. And I think that's a valuable part about coaching that some miss, because we are passionate about what we're passionate about, and we can go so far there. And sometimes we need to call in outside sources as well. Now, that maybe speaks to what makes a coach a good coach, but Jay, maybe you could talk to us about that. Like, what do you actually think makes a coach someone who is considered good or someone should hire?
Oh, well, the easy thing to say is just a coach that has that eye, especially in bikini. I have a really hard time with that. Everybody is a coach these days. And, when somebody's coming to me, like we were at Cuties, a couple weekends ago, and a lot of the girls are coming up to us and asking, like, when I'm interviewing a coach, like, what do I need to do? And what do I ask for? And I think that it comes down to you personally as an athlete, identifying what is valuable to you. If you have a coaching experience, what you liked, what you didn't, what you're looking for in that coach. That way you can ask those questions on a call. But the simple answer is, to me, a coach is someone who has that eye and someone who's at shows, who is studying the sport and watching the athletes and talking to the judges and looking at or talking to the promoters and seeing what is picked for that year. I think that we could say every year since that we started coaching that the national stages, it's a different look every single year that we have been coaching. So you have to really stay within the industry and at those shows to look at it. On a deeper level, I think a good coach as well is somebody who listens to their athletes. Not everything is black and white. Not everything is absolute statements. We're dealing with the human body here. We're dealing with emotions. We're dealing with people with families. Not everything is going to be 100% each week, and not one plan is going to work for everybody. So you have to be willing to listen and pivot. Prepping is a very emotional and vulnerable time. Those 20 weeks that you're prepping, it's really important to put in your check-ins with your coach how you're feeling. And we talked about at Cuties last week, something that Hannah said, we actually talked about this as Fit Body to the girls about coaching and what that looks like. And something that Hannah said is your check-in is not a performance. It is a real conversation with your coach to pivot or to find value in your week or to find something that worked or what's not working and to then progress. So to me, that's what makes a great coach, somebody that just has the attention, taking their time, showing value, and that can listen and almost chameleon themselves, be tough where they need to be in an understanding where they need to be. And almost, what Drew and I talked about, what he's getting better at is kind of meeting athletes where they're at. Not always expecting the athlete to come to you and not always going to the athlete, just kind of meeting each other in the middle or where they're at in that week. And we've seen a lot of really great progress in our athletes that way.
That's really cool. I think there's an unfortunate side of this sport is that you might get an athlete who's worked with another coach before who they couldn't express themselves emotionally to, or they couldn't share other aspects of the technique. So it does feel very performance like. So to be able to break those walls down too with clients after they've had that type of experience, or it's a perceived experience where they're like, what if my coach, because authority, or they maybe were in sports before and generally, we're taught to respect the coach in that particular way. Whereas it sounds to me like there's a respect, but it's also a collaborative effort.
You took the word. So on my consultation calls, I'm like, it should not be a dictatorship. It should be a collaboration. And you're right about when I've worked with D1 athletes that then have come to this, they have been coached their entire life. And in some ways it's great, but in some ways it's tough because they are always looking to you. Okay, what can I do better? And I'm like, whoa, sometimes we're just in off season and we need to just take a couple deep breaths and enjoy life. Right. But they've just been so structured and this balance.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's, I think, what gets a lot of us who come from an athletic background is like, what do you want me to do, coach? I'll do it, like whatever it takes. Now, you mentioned that there's things you're seeing every year that's maybe different at nationals. I think that can be confusing for athletes, especially who maybe aren't able to go to the shows or be as involved. What are you seeing this year that you think bikini competitors specifically need to make sure they don't overlook?
Well, always we look back to the bikini standard, right? Which is Miss Bikini Olympia from the year before. So for this year, obviously season hasn't started yet. So we got to see what if they're going to follow, the Jen Dory standard and whatnot. I think it went from I think people are too focused on conditioning, like getting so lean, and they're losing shape. And Sandy is very clear. And that was my position as well. When I turned pro, I was not the leanest one up there, but I was bubbly and I had shape. I was probably about 5 pounds up of where I should have been when I won my pro card, but I also wasn't shredded and so lean to the bone. And I've showed up at nationals that way and I was not awarded for it. So, but also too, you can't go the extreme of not showing up conditioned. So it's just a very fine line of not showing up too conditioned, not showing up, 4 weeks out, just trying to find that middle ground. I would actually rather my girls show up 4 weeks out and be able to get feedback, knowing that we need to come in tighter and be able to diet down a little bit more. I don't know. It's really hard. So what would you say?
I was just gonna say also the size,
size,
the bikini girls they've got some size to them. And I think that's an adjustment for some.
Yeah, especially new competitors to the sport. It's a hard conversation when girls are so excited and they're like, hey, I want to do this and I've never bodybuilded before, but I want to do a show. And the first question I always ask on my consult calls is, okay, well, what's your goal? Like when you step on the stage, what is your goal? Are you okay with, maybe a 5th to 8th place finish? Or are you wanting to be in that 1st or 2nd spot? Oh no, I'm competitive. I would be very upset if I'm not in the top spot. I'm like, okay, well, these girls are showing up huge. Like it's a bodybuilding show. It's not a who's skinnier competition. So we're going to have to put some time on to add lean muscle. And sometimes that's a hard conversation for someone, especially who's so excited and they just found the sport and they want to jump on stage, but they also have that competitive side to them. So, some coaches will just be like, yeah, sure, let's go ahead and prep. And then they give that athlete such a different perception of what's going to happen on show day, where we try to be very honest and open so that there is no confusion of what the outcome's going to be. And sometimes, like I said, that's a tough conversation, but we just try to be very honest and realistic with them.
I wish I had that realism when I got into you too.
I wish I could communicate like she does to the athletes on the console calls.
Yeah, no, and Jay's in it too. Like as a bikini competitor, she's like, I can tell you straight up, like I do
Right.
this, and you need that time. I really think most of the people I know who've been in the sport for a while who weren't told that wish they would have been, because now we're kind of in this place like now I have to take the 2 or 3 years to grow, and I'm getting closer to maybe an age where I'm trying to get married, start a family. And so you almost wish someone would have been real with you like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes total sense. And I hear that all the time.
So now what do you think is the difference between a good athlete and a phenomenal winning champion athlete?
The ability to be coachable, which is a really strong word. I think it comes down to that coach to athlete relationship and trust and honesty. Trust, honesty, and communication. To me, those are the foundations of that relationship, which is only going to translate to the physical. If we have that foundation and if we can connect, and if our check-ins are raw and vulnerable and honest and communicative, the physical is only going to come from that. This past year, Jamie and I's relationship has grown on such a deeper level. And in turn, my physique has only gotten better because I've been able to communicate so well with her on what I'm seeing and what I need and what my training needs. Where before I'm always like, oh, she's so busy. Like, I don't want to put all this in my check-in, even though, but that's my own story that I'm telling myself. Right. And I hear girls say that about me all the time. Oh, you're so busy. I didn't want to bother you with that. And I'm like, no, I want you to tell me these things. Like, this is how I do my job. Like, so I think that that's really like the start of that, and that athlete being able to be coachable, which comes again from that relationship.
Yeah, I would rather coach an athlete that overshares on a check-in and is, what they feel is bothering me. Well, that just makes it easier for me to do my job. But I think to be, a top athlete in this industry, you have to have your work ethic and you do have to have some genetics. I think you can turn pro with one or the other. But I think to be a night show top 10 Olympian, I do think there is an element that, and I wish sometimes the judges would, I know they can't say that, right? But I wish you could give feedback, because some girls just work, and they have the best, greatest work ethic, but they just don't have the structure, right? And it's just, and I am talking top 10, right? So we're talking top 10 of the world on this conversation, but communication, work ethic, wanting to learn, I think is really, really, really good trait to have within an athlete. And also coming from another coach, maybe taking some of that self-talk and that narrative that we have told ourselves with a previous coach and just kind of starting fresh, I think is super important.
That's a great point. Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think that the difficult conversation about genetics, it's difficult because you don't want to hear it and no one wants to say it. And then also because on the other side, there's people who, even though their genetics weren't great, they were able to create a physique using their work ethic that actually at least got them and earned them that spot. So you also talked about being busy and clients sometimes not sharing things because they assume that you're busy or telling yourself stories. But I want to hear from a coach's perspective now, like what mental and physical toll does coaching take on you? Like what's the emotional toll?
Before we move on, sorry. When I'm talking genetics, I am leaning more towards wellness. I do want to be clear.
Okay.
Sorry, just because there is a huge gap there on like top wellness competitors. I do think it is slightly in bikini as well, but I'm specifically more frustrated with the wellness side where that kind of comment's coming from. Sorry.
Okay, that's a good clarification. And wellness is still developing so much, it seems like.
Yeah. So, but that's my thing. Like a lot of these girls, they just think they're going to just train. And like, I'm sorry, if you don't have like little short femurs and like this certain look, it's going to be very difficult to kind of accomplish the wellness look without having
I'm
a
glad you said
specific
that.
genetics. Sorry.
No, that's good. I'm glad you said it. So yeah, talk about the emotional toll of coaching on you guys.
We have such a bad this is Drew and I's kryptonite. I think, as a good coach makes himself very available, so like we allow our athletes to contact us anytime outside their check-in day if they need something. Some coaches are like, you can only talk to me on your check-in day. That's not how we operate. So literally we work all the time. We work 24/7, 7 days a week. Something that Drew and I did commit to this year, and it hasn't been the best yet, but trying not to work on Sundays, just to try to create that boundary. But again, with Drew's new role with Fit Body Fusion and we have girls flying out right now twice a week, every week right now to do assessments with him. It just hasn't happened that way. So yes, it's a mental toll, which then translates to physical. We are on our computers 10 hours a day right now, answering check-ins. And then when check-ins are done, it's about, creating new programs or answering back to questions. Or, we also have our gym and the books that we run and all the behind the scenes that people don't think about. We're getting it into season. We are also doing posing calls with all of our athletes. So that's, 4 hours a day for some days. So it is a lot. It is very draining mentally. There are some days where him and I shut the computer at 9 o'clock at night and we look at each other and we're like, where did the day go? So for us, something that we really wanted to commit to this year, knowing we were going to be busier with moving out to Arizona and being away from the gym and things like that, is that we really wanted to prioritize our own time to take care of ourselves during the day. So something that him and I have started doing is waking up in the morning and trying not to open up our computer first thing in the morning. It is so hard. It is the most difficult thing, but it's something
We're still like
learning.
we open our laptops at 8 a.m. this morning and it's like 5 o'clock. Like, well, look, we made it.
Yeah,
we keep having
did
this
it.
like,
Yeah.
look, we have to get up at 5 and start working. Like we started at 8 and we
Yeah,
put in
it
a
was
full
okay.
8 hour day, but it was okay. Like,
Yeah.
But I think, we have both suffered in the past of kind of over taking care of our clients, then neglecting ourselves. And that only leads to resentments in our job and with each other. So, I'm a really big believer in we have to take care of us so that we can bring our best to everyone around us. So it's very mentally draining, which then affects the physical, right? If I feel like that I have an overloaded work day or that I have 30 check-ins sitting in my inbox and I try to go train, it's not a conducive training session. I have to be on a check-in day. It's very structured in the way that I do my day, so that by the time I make it to the gym, I feel like I can fully immerse and focus in that.
How do you manage that? Oh, sorry, Drew, I don't want to interrupt you if you want to share.
I was just going to talk about just the travel. That's the
Oh
thing.
yeah, talk about that.
The travel, and especially when you start prep, like that's, we look at those, you're really gonna be starting prep right when the nationals like shows really start to start. So that's the tough part for me is like I don't eat. I don't like to eat. I don't know why on show days. Like it slows me down. So it's just
Hence feeding the athletes candy.
yeah. Because then I kind of know like my job's pretty well done. Yeah, so I just want to do a better job this year of maybe not traveling as much. I did 32 shows last year. So maybe doing like 20, 25. But
yeah, that was a lot. Last year was a lot.
it's just a control thing for me and just comfortable. I'll be honest and vulnerable that I've only been coaching full time for 2 years come May. So in order to kind of learn and evolve and kind of climb up the ranks with some of these top coaches, I just felt the need to be there and study. And even if I don't have athletes and shows, last year I went to shows to study. So I want to just trust myself and let go a little bit of my imposter syndrome and just be able to peak athletes remote and not have to be there.
I like that. That vulnerability is so awesome because I hear that from a lot of coaches, like when they're going to show after show after show, they get so drained and it is like, why do I keep doing that to myself? And I'm not missing anything necessarily. Like they realize like 20 suffices if it's not 35. And you mentioned travel, obviously, like with Jay being in prep too. And so I think about a lot of times like Olympia weekend, and that's intense. How do you even manage for yourself, let alone athletes too?
A lot of preparation and planning. Like food wise, definitely getting food like sent or making sure, there's so many things you have to think about as an athlete at the Olympia. Your food, making sure you have like your suit and, all the things you need for stage. And then making sure that you have everything you need to be a coach as well and work that week. So your laptop and and then a lot of your clients are coming into town for the Olympia. So of course you want to take that opportunity as a coach to see them in person and do in-person check-in. So it is a fine balance. And that's where I can definitely be a lot better for myself because I never say no to my girls. There was one show last year, I think it was Republic of Texas. I got myself thrown into it last second and I had like 10 athletes that lived in Texas. So the day before show, they were all coming and checking in with me. And I think it was like 2 o'clock and I had not seen Jamie yet the day before show. And she's like, are you gonna come like see me? Have you even eaten a meal today? And I was like, hey, I'm still checking in athletes. She's like, Jordan, you are an athlete tomorrow. You need to focus. So that's it's hard. It's just about kind of like scheduling and finding balance. And that's where I get a little bit crazy when I'm traveling and I'm in prep. I get a little like really kind of obsessive because I just want to make sure I have everything. And I stay on a very strict schedule, which kind of makes people very crazy because they have to be on my schedule or else I'm off. But that's the way it works. That's how I get everything done. So it's hard.
How does it impact your guys' marriage?
In the beginning, it was very difficult. Would you say that? And then it's been better over the years. I mean, after some really hard conversations. Would you agree with that?
We know now, like when we're in coaching brain, personal brain, right? But it just checking in with each other is something Jordan and I started when we moved out here. And part of one of my non-negotiables of moving to Scottsdale was Sunday morning. We're gonna have like our own check-in together, right? And what like professionally, what do we want to accomplish this week? Personal goal, what do we want to accomplish? And then within our relationship, what do we want to accomplish? And holding each other accountable for that. And I think the biggest thing is come July when we go like Chicago Pro, Masters Nationals, Universe, all that. Like that's when making sure we are having the Sunday conversations and not putting our relationship on the back burner, and then not to mention then when she is prepping, just making sure I'm doing whatever I can with the dogs around the house and, because her days get even, shorter. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely been challenging in the past. And there have been preps where I just went, full tunnel vision and forgot I was married for 6 months. That's what I thought I needed at the time in order to be successful. Again, the key word there is thought that's what I needed, but really what I was doing was just not kind of looking at everything else and what was going on. And he was very respectful at that time and let me finish that prep. And then though the resentment came out.
Yeah.
So that's not good either, right? You have 6 months of resentment sitting up. It's like, okay, cool, you're done. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I was just blindsided. So I wouldn't suggest that either. But as an athlete, yeah, it's for me, it's about kind of, taking a step back, realizing that I'm an athlete and I have all these things to accomplish. I'm a coach. I have all these things to accomplish, but I'm also a wife and I have all of these things to accomplish as well. And there is a way to find balance, but you have to communicate. I have to tell him what my day looks like and what my needs are. And when I'm free or when I'm available, he has to also tell me what he needs if I'm, lacking or he feels like I'm not giving him that attention. And that way then I can pivot. So that's where we've gotten a lot better really over the last 6 months to a year. Really this last season is when we kind of really took a look at that. Yeah, it's definitely about communication.
I think it helps us be a better coach though, because so many times we can have these conversations, we kind of see some tendencies or some trends within an athlete's behavior. I don't know how many other coaches are married that are actively coaching with full roster married to an Olympian, but being able to like understand that as a husband and then a coach and then relay that information. And, she can talk about, how she can get tunnel visioned and remind athletes like, hey, don't forget, like you do have a kid or you do have a husband, like, and we're really good at structuring like free meals or, we have a good amount of athletes where I coach the husband, she coaches the wife, and be able to like, hey, when are you giving your free day? Or like, we'll collaborate together and help that athlete or that couple. So I think it definitely gives us an advantage in understanding that and kind of
from the different lenses.
Yeah. Giving them their space in off season and making sure, we're pushing those athletes to reconnect and things like that with their significant others. And then knowing like, hey, prep's around the corner and like things are about to change.
Totally. I love that you can see how it actually benefits your clients too, because I'm all about build more than just a body, and it's easy in this sport to get so into just the bodybuilding. So to be able to focus on other areas of life and also know that your coach is an advocate for you in those other areas of life to say, hey, like, how is your husband? Hey, how's your wife? How's this going? How's your job? Like, are we going to afford this prep? You know, like, are you staying focused? And you got to have someone who can respect that. And that's a big part of health. I think just overall health. And aside from doing that for your clients, how else are you making client health a priority?
Tons of lab, like we run
We
labs.
run labs like no other. Yeah, we are really big on lab work. When we get started with a client, lab work is number one at the start of prep, lab work, midway, if there's some sort of something that's happening that we need to look at, we rely on labs a lot. Internal health is something that lab work is very simple to get, which a lot of people avoid for whatever reason. So we rely on that. And something else too is Drew and I do a lot of education, whether we're reading a book about something or we're right now, we have already done the J3U women's course. We're doing it again right now. We're doing it as a team actually through FitBody, which is awesome. So we're just constantly trying to learn and learn different perspectives. We don't always have to agree with another coach's perspective or a certain scientific, thought or idea. This is bodybuilding. There's book work, and then there's, actually what happens and what, experience and whatnot. But we constantly challenge ourselves for growth in education, in showing up, in talking to other people that we think are more knowledgeable than us. It's just about, being open-minded and not so closed-minded. I always say there are 10 ways to skin a cat. At the end of the day, it just matters how the cat gets skinned. And with these top coaches, something that Drew has said is he wants to one day take all the top coaches and they all have an athlete and we all put them on stage in front of the same judging panel. And what did you say about this? About all of you would have like a certain criteria, and it really just matters on that day who shows up their best, what the judging panel is, and then you could probably take it 3 days later, switch up the judging panel or something like that, and the placing would be completely different.
Yeah, I was saying if every like the big coaches, the big name bikini coaches all had one athlete and they did like 3 shows with the same athlete in a week with 3 different judging panels. Like
That'd be awesome.
I don't think there's one coach that would win all 3 of them. Like just
Yeah.
because of variance in the division and things like that.
But everybody has their approach, and
Right.
nothing's wrong or right. It's just an approach. And it's so interesting. Like the closer what Drew and I are friends with everybody, like the closer that we get to, their top coaches and we're bouncing off ideas, we're like, oh, that's a different way to do things. I wouldn't have done that, but I could see why, and it's so cool, like that collaboration.
I think a lot of like beginner athletes think that the coaches don't get along. Like, and I think that's so funny. Like,
It's not the case.
It's not the case.
Yeah.
Half the time, like we're going to dinners on Friday nights with whatever Kim or
Other
Paul
teams,
or
yeah.
James or whatever. Like, so, I think it's funny that if your coach thinks that there's probably some underlying things going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally hear you on that. It's such a small world that to not engage with the people you're able to collaborate with and raise the entire industry up together with, you're missing out. And as an athlete, I think it's funny when you think or see that because of online forums that maybe promote that, but it's not the case. And when you go to a show, it's like all these coaches do look like they're friends, which this is one of my questions that I'm asking everyone, and maybe goes hand in hand with this, which is, what do you have to say to people who say that all of this is political or that teams play a role in someone's placing?
The only way that teams play a role in someone's placing is the fact that those coaches are at shows every single weekend, so they know the criteria. I'm sorry, that is it. There is no because FitBody, Jane, or Atlas, or Pro Physique, or Body by O sponsor shows. The reason they win shows every week is because they're at shows every week. That is it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I agree.
Can't stand it. Like when we switched from Jordan to FitBody, and then we bought a pro card, and I was just like, no, like we didn't buy a pro card, or all my athletes that came to me from other, another team, and we turned pro first shot. Oh, they bought their pro cards because they're with Fit Body Fusion. I'm like, that is just ridiculous. Like,
I just think it's sad because it devalues the athlete, and their hard work, and it almost takes it away from them. And, my heart goes out to those athletes because I see it all the time where somebody's talking about how they won their pro card other than just hard work, determination, and them being the winner that day. It's just sad, and I don't see any of that. If I've had so many conversations with judging panels and nothing is ever talked about the team that they're on or the coach that they're with. This is what I saw this day, and this is what needed to improve. And they even have feedback for the winners. This is an ever-ending sport of bodybuilding. Even Jen Dory, who won the Olympia this year, probably still got feedback on what to improve on. You are never done in this sport. So I don't agree with that at all. And also going back to what we said before is like the heart of Fit Body is all of us coaches collaborating together. And there's 30 plus coaches on our team, and we all come from completely different backgrounds, completely different types of clients that we work with, completely different personalities, which is great. So like we have a coaches chat where, if I'm having a client that's checking in with me and saying some verbiage that maybe I don't really know how to respond to, I'll say, hey, like, this is what the athlete's going through. Like, what's some advice that I can give? And I'm getting all of this feedback and all this different perspective from our coaches on our team that I would have never thought of. So like the heart of Fit Body is really community. And it starts with us as coaches learning to collaborate together, and we are a family behind the scenes. I mean, we help each other so much. And then giving back to our athletes that way, we want them to experience that backstage, that collaboration and that experience together. And, Greg being there to take photos for all of them. And then they get something to go home with at the weekend with that Google Drive. It's something so small like that, but that is really our mission, is to provide that collaboration, that love, that support, not the negativity, not the separation. Like, that is not what we stand for.
That's awesome. Is that why you guys chose to be with Fit Body Fusion instead of maybe doing your own thing?
I don't think a lot of people know this. I was doing my own thing. I had like 30 athletes,
I remember that. I remember you guys were separate, and also you obviously have your gym. So you guys had this perfect pathway to really continuing to grow in your own way. So I was curious why you did decide to go with a team.
I mean, Jordan and I are really big on being, a small fish in a big pond, not a big fish in a small pond. And I felt like for us to continuously evolve and be a part of a family and a community that can continue to build and just become better and better and be vulnerable. There's times when Jamie will just call me, be like, hey, I'm hung up on something. Like, let's talk. Like, James can't do that, right? Like James, he's got that's him, right? And that's fine. It works for him, right? But there is value in having the depth of our squad that we have. We are able to be, we'll take the first real big weekend, the 30th, where I'm going to San Diego. We have a handful of pros doing San Diego, and then we have a handful of pros doing Clash. So Jamie and Greg are going to Clash. I'm going to San Diego. I'll FaceTime Jamie and check in all of our athletes in San Diego. Anybody in Clash, Jamie will handle. So we have the ability to be at multiple shows on a weekend and peak athletes perfectly. So, that's, I think, massive for us. And I saw the value from what they provide for us coaches to go and grow and continue and pour money into coaches and developing us and giving us continuing education courses. And you can't put a dollar amount on it. And I saw it from the beginning. It's very easy to see once you're when you're in it. So
yeah, to me, there's no coincidence that I grew so much as an athlete and as a coach and individually since we joined Fit Body. Yes, we had our own coaching team. We had our own gym. I was by myself backstage. My coach was not there at the time. He was a great coach, but he wasn't there. And I felt lost, and then when we joined Fit Body, I was just an athlete. Drew was just a husband. And then, he got hired on as a coach, and I turned pro that year. And, everybody knows my story, it only got better from there. Drew just turned his first 3 pros last year. He has, become such a light in this industry, and, people are now calling him and looking up to him. And it makes total sense because now we feel so supported and because we have learned so much since joining this team, because we have that collaboration with so many people around us that it just took us from 0 to 100 so fast. So there, to me, there's no coincidence on our success now being with FitBody. Also, as well, I talk about this too. We deal with the back office of our gym, which is a lot. Having our team manager on FitBody Fusion who deals with all the finances and the forms and all the like little things that take up so much time during the day, that provides so much value to us because we just focus on our athletes and we just focus on coaching and helping them. And that is pivotal. It is something so small that people don't think about.
Totally. Like, why put even more on your plate that you don't have to or want to do? It's like when I hired my assistant, I was like, let me think of all the things I no longer want to focus on so I can focus on what I enjoy the most. And that it also relieves a lot of resistance to doing certain things, or like you guys said, resentment as well. Cause now you're like, okay, I'm not feeling a block to getting more clients or communicating with my clients in a certain way because I have this relief here. But I know we only have like 15 minutes left. So I want to ask you guys one more question that's more in depth, and then we'll get into hypotheticals and a rapid fire. So what are some of the common misconceptions people have about this sport when they come to you guys? And maybe also, Drew, you could talk even more about some of the wellness as well, because I'm sure people who are working with you guys will listen to this and maybe they're even in between. But yeah, common misconceptions about the sport.
So wellness is not out of shape bikini. Sorry. You don't turn your toes out and just bend over on stage and you're not wellness. So maybe at a small regional show that works, but that is not true on us. So that's a misconception.
Yeah,
You have to go pro with peds. You do not. It's, there's a very fine line of genetics and newbie gains and time and good food and good training. You do not have to go pro with peds at all. That is definitely a misconception.
I have a figure crawl this year that very well could turn pro neutral.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I love to hear that. I was talking to a coach this past weekend at the women's workshop who has like the best of the best. And he was explaining to me how that person is natural and no one would know it. And they don't like to talk about it because it makes them seem like they're on this high horse. And I was like, that's so, like, for me as a natural competitor, I love hearing that because I'm like, it's empowering. And then I'm sure people listening, hearing you guys say that, it's like, that's awesome that it's still possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, other than that too, I mean, you already hit the nail on the head. So many people think that there's politics in the sport, or you have to be on a certain team or know a certain someone. And that's definitely not the case at all. But really that's it. I mean, the biggest things that we hear are the peds comments. Yes, wellness right now is a very hard conversation with when you're talking to Drew and I on consult calls. There's a lot that's going into that wellness category right now that's very difficult as far as the size goes. It's only getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and these girls are not willing or able to train as hard as they need to for as long as they need to. Everybody wants that pro card and they want it right now, and then having these conversations with these girls of like, hey, you're going to have to take probably 3 to 5 years off to get a pro card in wellness. And it's like, I don't want to look like that in the off season. I don't want to take that much time. I don't want to have to push the peds in order to, get there faster either. So it's, do you follow your genetics, or do you follow how you love to train and what you want to look like? It's extremely difficult, but that's really what our biggest things are right now, I think.
For sure.
Okay, so we'll do some hypothetical questions.
Okay.
If I'm only a year into competing, but I'm doing really, really well, I've got a few overalls under my belt, and my goal is to go get my pro card now, but I've not yet stepped on the national stage. And I've been working with the same coach for all of these shows, but now I'm looking for a new approach. Why would I hire you?
Well, I would ask you that on the call. Like, why are you're having so much success with your current coach? Why do you feel like you need a new approach? And what is it maybe that you don't like? And there are some consult calls where I'm like, why are you leaving? You are doing so well and you have that great connection. And to them, they just feel like they have to leave in order to do well on a national level, which I think to me is backwards. I think that you need to stay with the coach that kind of knows your body if you're doing well and if you're comfortable and you really have no other complaints. I guess why you would hire us then if it comes to that point is you just feel like the coach maybe isn't showing up for you or doesn't understand that that you know you're going to be needing to get to that national level. Maybe you just want to be on a team and you want support and you want someone that you know is going to be at your shows and is going to be in your back corner or has that eye. I think that's definitely what Drew and I provide is that love, that communication. We're showing up for you. We can, go back to what we said in the beginning of the call. Him and I are very good at being a chameleon and meeting you where you're at. I guess that's why you would leave that coach and hire us. I would also go back to saying too, or give them that question back of these overalls that you won. How big were these shows? Were they small shows with only a couple girls in your class? Or you had a larger show where there was 8, 10 plus girls in your class? And now you really know that it was competitive and that you're ready to go to nationals. I have some consult calls and they're like, yeah, I won a couple of overalls. I'm ready for nationals. And I noticed that there was 2 girls in their class. And it really wasn't that competitive. It was a show in the middle of Iowa, so while that's maybe a great show, it's not really one of the larger regional shows. So there's context there. There's definitely more questions and conversation that would need to be had, in my opinion.
I agree. I mean, I'd want to dig into like the hurdles that they were having within their relationship. Early on in my career, I just took whoever I could consult with. And then I realized I was doing myself and those athletes a disservice. So really diving deep into their past experiences of different coaches, or if it's just been one coach, what they've liked or didn't like, and then maybe educating them on my process. And when, Jay and I fly in Thursday nights of show days, you check in with us Thursday night, you wake up fasted Friday morning. And I kind of talk them to how hands-on the Fit Body Fusion approach is. So, yeah.
So now if I'm 4 weeks out from a show, but I keep telling you guys I don't feel ready, but you believe that I am, what's your response?
A regional show?
Either. Yeah. If it's a different answer, I'd like to hear it.
It is for me. The way I approach, so I prefer to actually come into regional shows. Obviously, we have to have a good structure, a good base. I don't want to win the overall, if I'm being honest. I don't want Sandy's feedback or Tyler's feedback to be, you look great, just show up next week at Universe. I want to show up a little bit off on purpose, because there is value in making change in 2 weeks.
Delivering on
feedback. I think the worst feedback you could be is you're perfect, show up, the same way. That's almost impossible to do. So I tend to strategically have my athlete prepare on looking the best at that next national show. So I like to do 1 or 2 warm-up shows 4 to 2 weeks out. And sometimes that is uncomfortable for an athlete that is seasoned. And I'm just like, just trust me on this. Like I did it to all 3 pros last year. I did this. So I knew we weren't 100% showing up to their qualifiers, and they actually did end up winning the overall though. But I knew it wasn't enough to go turn pro, and it was strategic. So they weren't peaked fully, because I knew I only had either 2 weeks to either dump them back down and refill them back out or whatever approach I was doing. But in terms of then having confidence on stage, that's something you have to balance out with maybe a newer competitor that still feels you're probably better at that than me.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the girl was coming to me, she's 4 weeks out, she's like, Coach, I do not feel ready. Like I would get on a call with her. I get on calls all the time, and I feel like the girl's hearing my voice and like, hey, you look fantastic. This is a very normal feeling. Let's put together your side by sides of when you started prep till now, and then I tell them too, like, you're going to look back on this photo in 15 weeks and be like, what was I thinking? Like I am lean. I do look great. I am shredded, da, da, da. So, just getting on the call and kind of bringing them back down to reality a little bit. And again, this is if they are ready and they're coming to me. Now, if the athlete comes to me 4 weeks out and they're like, Coach, I don't think I'm ready. And I'm looking at their photos and I'm like, yeah, I think you're right. We just extend the show out. I give them 6 more weeks. I give them 8 more weeks. And then that just gives us more time. So
there's a show every weekend.
There's a show every weekend.
But I also I think you and I would have caught that 8 to 10 weeks out.
We would, but
sorry.
Yeah.
Hypotheticals here.
Yeah.
Maybe something happened. Yeah. Maybe something happened.
For sure. They get sick. So it's been happening like
everybody's sick right now.
So
exactly.
it happens where you're 4 weeks out and then you get sick, or your kids bring home a bug, whatever, and then just staying calm, just be like, look, we were planning on doing Dallas Pro. There's Republic of Texas 3 weeks later, whatever it is. Let's just do Republic of Texas.
I like it. Yeah. So now let's say someone comes to you wanting to compete or is considering it. What's something you like one thing that you want them to know before they actually do compete?
One thing.
I just want them to have their goal. Like, what is the goal of competing?
I would say identifying your why. Why are you doing this? Bodybuilding should be not your entire life. You should have other things that you're doing this for. I love bodybuilding because it makes me a better person overall. It makes me a better wife. It makes me a better coach. It makes me just better in all my ways. So, I always go back to my why of why I'm doing this. And for some of my athletes, it's that they want to be a good example for their kids. So in the mornings when they wake up on those heavy, harder prep days and they don't want to go get that 1 hour done of cardio, they go back to thinking about their kids and their kids are watching them and, how they want to show up. So I would say that it's very important for you to identify why you're doing this because the stage is 30 seconds to weeks, days, hours, months of super hard work, very high cardio, very low food, hunger, all the things for seconds on stage. So you really just got to love the process and why you're doing it.
That's awesome. Now, let's say your client comes to you and say they rebounded after their show and they just want to reverse it and get back to normal. What do you do?
Like lose the weight.
Yeah, like they're like, I want to lose the weight. I want to get back to that prep version of me. I want to reverse all the damage.
Yeah, this happened to me earlier this year. I had a girl that went on stage and I would have never thought from this athlete that this would have happened. She basically was checking in with me and sending me old photos and giving me fake weigh-ins. And then 6 weeks later, I'm thinking she's 7 pounds up from stage weight. She was actually 40 pounds up from stage weight and got on a call with me and had a really in-depth conversation with me. This athlete was very open to the idea of like, hey, the damage is done. Like, I just kind of want to move forward from here. And I give her so much credit for that. However, there are athletes that are like, I did this, and now how do you fix it? And unfortunately, it's going to have to take time, right? It took you time to get to this point, and now telling me, and now it's going to have to take me time to fix it. So number one is lab work. We're going back in now for the lab work. Let's go see how we're looking internally. We're going to have to restructure food a little bit. Maybe we do pull back on food and try to get you a little bit tighter, or we might have to reverse because your food is still so low that we might have to reverse a little bit right now to get you into a better metabolic place so that in a few weeks we could be able to cut in a healthy way. Drew and I are always going to be health number one. So like, sometimes too, it's okay for the athlete to kind of sit with that and to reflect on that and to journal about it and to kind of feel those feelings and not fix it right away for them, physically. It's extremely difficult, but most of the time, like we're not going to be able to fix it right away. Once we know that it's an issue, we first have to kind of work on getting the mental state in a good spot too, because after show, the binge and, not reversing and things like that really comes from the mental standpoint, right? You're so hungry. You don't understand why you're so hungry and why you keep eating and you're not full. So also educating them on like leptin and ghrelin and what happens when you're that lean and really starting here so that then the physical can start coming back around as well is huge for reversing or binging. And I know that you can speak on that as well.
I was gonna say too,
Yeah.
like we told athletes before, like mentally, like, hey, put your coaching on pause, like go work with Celeste, or like you have so much, you have so much stuff out there for athletes that we send our athletes all the time. I think just figuring out, was it just truly like free for all that happened post show, or is there some underlying mental things going on? And talking through and trying to sort that out with the athlete, and then give them the appropriate response from there, and help guiding them, right? Because for so many first timers, it's like I love our class shows in Orlando, but so many first timers then want to go do Epcot on Sunday and drink and eat in the world. And I'm like, okay, we are not setting ourselves up correctly if we go do show and then Sunday morning wake up and go eat and drink around the world at Epcot. So just educating and just getting those athletes ready, having that plan post show, pre peak week, talking about some strategies, and let's like use some more protein dense foods and just really try to, get their satiation up, or making sure they're ahead of schedule and feeding them into the show. We've had better success where if we're not still dieting, Wednesday leading into the show. And ideally we can start feeding like 10 days out. And then it's not as much because it's not crammed into like Thursday fill out, Friday fill out, Saturday show day, Sunday Disney World. So if we can like get a week to 10 days, and then they're not going to go as crazy when they go to Epcot or whatever. So
Yes.
but it happens. I had one that he finally checked in. He did the Whitney Jones show with me in October. Never checked in.
Oh
Went through
no,
some text.
finally.
Yeah, and he had some stuff going on. I would shoot him a text. Hey, is everything okay? Can I do anything for you? How are we feeling? And he sent check-in photos yesterday and weigh-in, and like he's actually only up 13 pounds.
Oh.
So, but the narrative, right, for a guy, that's like nothing. But like his narrative, and it's like, dude, like you're not in bad shape. But he just that monologue, we've talked about this a couple times, inside of his brain, like the athlete, they tell themselves, and it's obviously true novice athletes it happens a bit more with, but it does not to say it doesn't happen with pros and Olympians.
It
Yes.
does.
So true. Yeah, and I appreciate you guys sending people to me. It always means a lot. And yeah, it's such a pleasure working with your clients too, because I know they're in good hands. And something that you guys said that really resonates with me too is that narrative. Because I know that when you start telling yourself that story that I'm too far gone or I ruined this, then you're likely to fall into more maladaptive behaviors, and it just goes and goes versus that communication and getting the support. And I try to explain to clients that the hard lesson I learned was you invest the time anyways. If you love this sport, you're going to invest the time anyways, whether or not you nailed your reverse and you're continuing into your improvement season, or you didn't, and now you're having to maybe resolve that and then improve. Either way, if you were to prep for the next 16 weeks, you're going to have to invest this building time anyways. So might as well just do it in the best way possible with the best guidance that you can have.
Absolutely. Definitely.
So if you guys have time for rapid fire, I'll shoot them off at you. If not, we can end it.
Let's do it.
Okay. So do you believe in using waist trainers?
No.
It depends.
If it fits your macros or a structured meal plan?
If it fits your macros in an off season, 12 weeks out meal plan.
Yeah, I agree.
And do you believe in fasted cardio?
Depends.
PEDs and or intensity factors within athletes and schedule.
Yes.
And are you a fan of using water cuts?
No.
Not a fan, only if it's a male that's got to make weight. That's just uncomfortable. Has to happen.
And then you're like, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Like, well, I work with men, so sometimes.
PEDs, no.
And steady state or high intensity interval training specifically for fat loss when a woman is trying not to sacrifice fullness in her glutes.
I like steady state. I think that it keeps recovery good, and I just like steady state. Yeah.
Lists.
Cool. Okay. Was there any of those that you were like, if I don't expand on it, I'm going to be annoyed?
I just think like on the cardio aspect, there's a lot of variables there with HIIT versus list. Like you were very specific with keeping glutes full. So then yeah, I would go
list.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about most of these listeners are bikini competitors who are like, I don't want to lose my glutes. So
what do you mean? Not the 212 guys aren't listening to this podcast?
Hey, I hope there are some. They need it too. No, us bikini girls, we're inspiring. We're so awesome. I hope they are listening. So thank you guys for coming on. How can people work directly and specifically with you?
Go to the Fit Body Fusion website, and if you request a consult, there's one of the buttons on the top corner. You can fill out an application, and there is a drop down that says choose your coach. So then you can choose Jordan Brannon or Drew Brannon to work with directly, and then we will get your application and reach out to you directly to schedule a consult.
Awesome. Thank you guys for doing this together too. I know you are separate coaches within the team, but also you're a great team together. So I'm happy that I got to speak with both of you, and Drew actually spend more time with you. I've spent a lot of time with Jay. It was nice to really get to know you more too.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one more thing, like we tell our athletes, when you hire one of us, you get both of us. There's some when I coach females, and there's some conversations that are tough to have with a 31-year-old male. So I always, a lot of my athletes will reach out to Jordan, like if they're struggling with something that, maybe they don't think obviously I can relate with, or posing. I mean, I know what you should look like in a front pose, but I've never walked in 5-inch shoe pair of heels. So I don't know what that feels like. So, she does a lot of posing with my girls, and when you get one of us, you get both of us. And I think it's a huge value to our athletes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for coming on. I'll put all of that in the show notes page. You guys, that's always on celestial.fit/podcast. So you can find how to connect with them there. Also tag us after you listen. Let us know what you took away from this, or feel free to reach out to them or me with extra questions you maybe want covered. And hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you're in the world while you're listening to this episode. Just make it awesome.